My name is Barry Cranford. I'm the founder of the London Java community and also run RecWorks, which is a tech recruitment company. So at RecWorks, what we're all about is trying to find ways that recruitment can be a force for good in the tech industry beyond just getting people jobs. So what that means is we're not just about trying to get people their next jobs, but we really want to help people find either a career they love or a passion for what it is they're already doing, and then help them go all in on it. So to give you a taste of what we do, we've helped grow the LJC now to 8,000 people. We've made over 3,000 personal one-to-one mentor introductions, and we've run over 800 learning-focused events, and that's including 130 now since lockdown started. So it's all done for free. It's all something that we do to try and help the community. So basically, we're paid by companies to find talent, and then we drive a part of that revenue into making things like this happen. So this year, we've been doing things a little bit differently, and we've started setting up what we're calling ladder groups. So the idea is to bring people together that are on a similar ladder, similar learning path. So the first one that we did was aspiring speakers. And we've got now just over 50 people, new speakers within the LJC this year at the lightning talks, many of whom have gone on to do full talks and a couple of conferences. We've got the aspiring CTOs and just recently the aspiring principal engineers. So if you're interested in any of that, then feel free to ping me a message, look me up on LinkedIn or Twitter or anything, and I'm happy to take you through more of any of it. Anyway, this evening we have Heather with us. So Heather is the lead for the Java community standardization efforts at Oracle and is a leader of the global community-driven adoption user group programs. So she's chairperson of the JCP program, and in this role she drives the efforts to transform the program and broaden participation and diversity in the community. So she's passionate about Java, women in technology and developer communities, and is serving as an international speaker and community organizer of developer hack days around the world. So Heather, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the nice introduction, Barry. So I've been able to present to the London Java community a few times over the years, this time virtually, my first time virtually. So I'm missing my visits to London, but happy to see a small group of you here tonight. Even if you've seen one of my talks before, I'm always coming up with new ways that you can participate. So yeah, you'll do something a little bit new in here every time you come to see one of my talks. So in my role, I do work at Oracle. As Barry already said, I did work at Sun Microsystems previous to working at Oracle. So that means I've been involved with the Java community for 2 decades when I was really young. Kidding. I really do miss all the travels, but I am still having the opportunity to meet with many Java user groups around the world virtually, just like we're doing here tonight. So I hope to be able to answer all of the questions that you may have. If I don't answer your question during my talk or in the Q&A, you feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. That's the best way to get in touch with me. I'm at Heather VC on Twitter. So I'm sure most of you are already Java developers, but if you're not, just some stats to let you know that Java still remains the #1 programming language around the world, continuing to grow. And our focus now, and my focus in particular in the Java Community Process program, is on the Java SE, so the standard edition, and making it the ideal platform for the cloud. So in terms of relevant stats I put out here, 51 billion active virtual machines and 30 billion cloud connected virtual machines. So obviously trends change in the software development world, but Java remains #1. I think the biggest change I've seen over the last couple of decades is that you used to really just pick one technology and run with it, but now you see developers needing to constantly be learning new technologies, but especially if you're a developer that didn't learn Java in school and started with something else, Java is a great tool to have in your toolbox because it does remain one of the most in-demand and highly paid technical skills out there. So there are lots of things, though, that have remained the same with how Java is developed, and that is what I call our philosophies. So the philosophies around how we evolve the platform have remained consistent, and that is we ensure to make the platform complete and being careful around quality and what's put into the platform and keeping the platform secure, but also looking at ways that we continue to make Java more modern and bring in innovation. I think some of the things we've done over the last couple of years have really focused on that in modernization, but still at the same time being open and transparent in how we evolve the technology and really bringing in that active ecosystem participation. I think that's one of the key differentiators of Java and what has continued to make it so successful over the last 25 years. Yeah, in 2020, we're celebrating 25 years of Java. So some of the ways and suggestions that I'm going to give you throughout my presentation kind of tie in with that, so we can celebrate the past successes we've had of Java, but looking forward, how can we continue to ensure that Java remains vibrant and successful in the decades to come? So most developers who use Java every day don't necessarily know that Java is actually governed by a standards organization effort that is the Java Community Process Program. If we're in a real face-to-face room, I usually ask for a show of hands. Essentially, who knows what the JCP is, and most of the time, the majority of the audience doesn't know. I recognize a lot of you who are joined here today, though, so I think most of you do know that everything that goes into the JavaX namespace is governed by the JCP. So the way the JCP works is that it's driven by the members, but we have a small team that provides the oversight and governance. So that's really my role as the chairperson. This slide I'm showing is just showing how the organization is set up. So as the chair, I lead the executive committee, which acts like the board of directors. And then I also have a small staff that helps me to run the organization. But the main heavy lifting is obviously done by developers. So members of the JCP program, which are made up of Java developers from all around the world. So every specification in the Java SE, JavaX namespace goes through a process in the JCP. It has a project lead. We call those specification leads or spec leads. And then the spec lead has expert group members who help them to deliver on the final release, and also contributors and members who help to participate and collaborate in that effort. And there's opportunities for you, even if you're not a JCP member, to get involved in that effort. And I'll go into that later in the presentation. So how it works is all of our projects defined under the JCP are called JSRs. So every JSR is a single version of a specification. For instance, the Java SE platform is a JSR. So every version of the Java SE platform is a JSR. It has a leader. That spec lead for the platform is Oracle, and also an expert group. So developers from different organizations that rely heavily and contribute to Java SE. And then every expert group, and this is really one of the key things that's different about Java and ties back into the philosophies and how we ensure these things, is it's not just about the code. So every JSR is not just the project's code, it's the specification and the technology compatibility kit as well, in addition to the code itself. So every JSR delivers the specification telling us if we can build an implementation. It has an implementation. We call that the reference implementation. But in addition to that, we have a test suite. So that means that independent implementers can take the specification, write their own implementation, run it against the TCK, and then have a compatible implementation. So that's really what enables that active ecosystem and also choice for Java developers, as well as for customers, and choice in the implementation. So all these things work together to ensure that we have strong compatibility, as well as those choices for customers, users, and developers who are out there using the technology every day. So whether the JSR project is the platform itself or an optional add-on package, which we still have going through the JCP, so optional packages based on Java SE, it follows the same development life cycle. So that means it has an open public review and development with opportunities for you to provide feedback, as well as the requirement that the JCP Executive Committee has to approve that JSR before it can be used in any projects out in the world in production. Of course, you can use the projects in development all the way throughout the life cycle. That's one of the best ways to provide feedback. So members of the JCP can be on the JSR, can lead JSRs, as well as associate members can join as contributors on JSRs. And that's an international effort. One of the favorite things about my job and why I think I've stayed involved for so long is the opportunity to have an interaction with developers who are participating in this from all over the world. And the biggest change, if you look over the last 25 years in how the organization is I guess, evolving, is that you used to see the majority of JCP members were companies, but now what we've seen is a shift to that the majority of members of the JCP and participants are actually individual developers. So not only do we have companies who are using Java every day participating as members in the JCP, we also have open source and nonprofit groups, Java user groups like the London Java community, who's one of the most involved, and individual developers. And really the motivation and the benefits that individuals, developers get out of this, because I saw that as a significant shift in our membership, was the impact on your career, as well as the opportunity to become a thought leader in the global Java community, not only in your local community, but also the global Java community, or you're just being a member of the Java society, be a Java citizen. I think that was my favorite quote that I got when I asked that question from Heinz Kibbutz. Joining the JCP is like being a Java citizen. So you have voting rights in our annual elections, and have the opportunity to stay on top of changes as they go through and are evolved through the platform in the JCP. So our executive committee, we just finished our elections. So if you were a member, you had the opportunity to vote, and congratulations to the London Java community who was elected for another term, so 2-year term. London Java community has served on the executive committee for quite a few years, was one of the first Java user groups to become an EC member along with SoJava. So the executive committee has, again, that balance, and that's really through, I think, the participation of the community in the elections. We have companies serving on the executive committee. We also have nonprofits like the Eclipse Foundation, and 2 Java user groups, and 2 individual developers as well who are serving on the executive committee. So this year we've been meeting virtually. Here I have a picture of the last time we met in person, which was last October at the Twitter San Francisco offices. So we'll continue to meet virtually to talk about changes that need to happen, as well as talk about the technology as it's evolving. So while we have had changes in the Java community, we continue to maintain that for the Java platform itself, we need Java as an open standard, but also in open source. So not one or the other, we need both. Java is developed in an open source way through the majority of the work done in Openjdk, but JEPs or Java enhancement proposals, as projects are organized in Openjdk, feed up into JSRs as the Java platform spec. So Java SE is essentially the reference implementation for the platform JSR. And the last major release of Java was Java 15 that came out just a couple months ago in September. Starting with Java 9, we did move. Since Java 9 introduced modularity into the platform, we looked at how we could modernize and bring in innovations more quickly to the Java platform, and we shifted to a faster release cadence. So the modularity project Jigsaw with Java 9 really enabled us to be able to embrace that faster release cadence. So what I've done over the next few slides is break down some of the changes and what that looks like and how you can stay on top of that new release cadence, as well as participate more fully in the process. So in addition to a faster release cadence, we also introduced the concept of long-term support to Java. Not a new concept in technology again, but we have that now in the Java platform. So that means that every 3 years, there's a long-term support release. But we still continue to have platform releases every 6 months, just that every 3 years, one release will be designated as a long-term support release. So the long-term support release that came out, the one that's available now is Java 11, and the next one will be Java 17. But nothing technically different about these releases. What's different about it is really what you can do with the technology after it's been declared final and how support is provided. But technically, the way it works is that whatever's ready every 6 months goes into that platform release. The other thing around that same time frame that happened was Oracle open sourced several proprietary features that they had previously included only in their Oracle JDK into Openjdk. So that also helped to accelerate some of the innovation. So it went through that exact same process. So what happened was, and what I'm getting into now is just a brief review from 2017 with JDK 9 to where we are now in 2020. So with JDK 9 and with really every release prior to JDK 9, we had major feature releases. So that meant that we pick one feature and the Java platform release would be all about that feature. And whenever that major feature was ready is when the Java release would come out, and it would typically come out every 3, 4, I think once it took even a little bit longer than 4 years. And it would have that major feature in it. That's what the release would be all about. But in addition, it would have all of the other work that had been going on during that 3, 4 year time period. So what it looked like was a major release with over 100 different new features. That was typical of every release. And that came out every 3 to 4 years. So while Java 9, most people thought of it about Project Jigsaw and modularity, Java 9 was really had many other features in it, often features that would get overlooked. But in any case, at this time, September 2017, Java 9 came out. And 6 months later, we started into this release cadence. So we did deliver on that with JDK 10. It came out 6 months later. The first feature release that came out with whatever was ready that had been developed within Openjdk and been promoted into the JSR for Java 10 to be approved by the executive committee. And what it turned out looking like was it had 12 Java enhancement proposals or features. So a lot more manageable. I think the other thing that you can see is that it's easier to identify what's in that release, right? So, and 6 months later, you're able to utilize and implement those features. So I think for Java 10, what that looked like was JEP 286. That was probably one of the most interesting features from developers that I talked about, local variable type inference. And the way that you can stay on top of what's coming next is through these screenshots I'm showing you. So in Openjdk, every project release is going to have a schedule, and then it's also going to be updated constantly with what features are going to be in that release. Because as the JEPs that get worked on through the projects in Openjdk, they get promoted as candidates to be included in a platform release. So if you continue to kind of monitor and follow these pages, bookmark them as they come out, on a periodic basis, you can get an idea of what features and functionality might be coming in the next release. So 6 months later, in September 2018, we did have JDK 11. Initially, it looked like there were only going to be about 4 JEPs in that release, but it turned out to have 17. One of the reasons for the increase in JEPs also was how I talked about some of those proprietary features from Oracle's JDK got integrated into Openjdk with JDK 11. So that meant features like Java Mission Control and Flight Recorder are now available as part of Openjdk. So that helped to add to the features that went into Java 11. This is a long-term support release, but again, it doesn't have more because it's designated as a long-term support release. That really just was a coincidence of timing that all of these new features were ready with JDK 11. And then 6 months later, again, the new model was calling for JIPs to be targeted only when they're ready. In March 2019, we had JDK 12. Around this time, I also started to see, if you follow the stats, you can see who's contributing to the projects in OpenJDK. And we had here a feature contributed by Red Hat, Shannon Doa, as an experimental feature that you can see here. So what I've started to see is that in addition to enabling more innovation available to you in the platform releases on a faster release cadence, what you see is contributors are also more, I guess, motivated to participate and contribute code into the project. I think, again, because of that more immediate release, rather than having to wait 4 years before you see your code contributions potentially go into the next platform, you're going to be able to potentially see them at a much faster pace. So I think that also is good and healthy for the community. You can also see with JDK 12, we also started to introduce this idea of preview features. So switch expressions was introduced as a preview feature with JDK 12. So what that means is it's fully available and ready to use, but when you download that release, it won't be automatically turned on. You need to go in and turn on the feature. And with preview features, what that means is they're looking for more feedback before they provide it as a default standard feature in the platform release. So especially for language changes, those have become almost by default preview features to start, and then where they're looking for more feedback from the community on those set of that JEP in particular before it's promoted as a standard feature. So with JDK 13, 6 months later, we had only 5 JEPs in JDK 13. We also have another new preview feature you see coming out of Project ZGC, one of its new JEPs. September 2019. So what you can see is that we stuck to this 6-month release cadence. Sometimes the releases are a little bit bigger than others, but what happens is whatever's ready goes into it. And that means those features are available for you to use. And you also can start to look at a migration calendar that maybe is a little bit different than you'd become accustomed to, maybe where you had a very large software migration project every 3 to 4 years. Maybe people are starting to look at more continuous delivery models where they're on an ongoing basis looking at testing their application against the latest platform release of what's coming and deciding and making changes to their code base based on being able to have more access and transparency into the changes. So with JDK 14 in 2020, March 2020, we had a larger feature set of 15 JEPs. Pattern matching came out as a preview feature, also more features from Project ZGC. And we now have our current release that came out 2 months ago. So if you want to use the latest release of Java, you go to OpenJDK, and the latest release would be JDK 15. It was approved by the executive committee in September as JSR 390. And you can see, I think one of the more interesting features, I mentioned it, I think a couple of times as a preview feature, was text blocks. So that's now available with JDK 15. But JDK 16 is currently being developed. So that means that you can go and get the early access builds right now. The general availability date is going to be in March of next year, but every couple of weeks we have early access builds that are already coming out, and you can find in the download page release notes as well as links to the issue tracker. And I'll show you a snapshot of what that looks like a little bit later. So I've moved through all the dashboards where you can see what's been put into all the into all of the platform releases. But my most common question that I would get next is, well, how do we know what's coming next in Java and what new features we can get? It kind of seems like it would be a surprise every 6 months with what's going to be in the release. But of course, one of the ways you can stay on top of that is to go and download the early access builds and monitor those platform dashboard pages I showed you. But also I've highlighted for you here some of the major projects that are being prioritized for looking at new features coming into Java. So the way that works is we still have these named projects in OpenJDK. And as the project moves along, JEPs are introduced. And when the JEPs get further enough along, they're targeted for a platform release. So where our old model meant maybe we would pick a particular project like Valhalla and focus exclusively on that for 3 to 4 years, and we wouldn't have a new Java platform release until that was ready. We now can have incremental things come out of each of these projects as they're ready to be integrated into the main line of the platform. So some of the priorities that the platform team is working on is, of course, keeping security our #1 priority, but also looking at ways that we can improve productivity and continue to ensure compatibility. Also looking at increasing density, improving startup time, improving predictability, and simplifying serviceability and profiling. So you can see the projects that are in OpenJDK kind of mapped to each one of those priorities. And I'll give you just a brief overview of a few of these projects so you can have an idea of what's happening in them. And then I encourage you, if any of these are of particular interest to you, to go ahead and look up the project in OpenJDK. So all of these projects are going to have their own mailing lists and wiki pages and issue trackers. And then, as I said, depending on the stage that the project's in, they'll also have some JEPs that have been introduced. So Project Valhalla is one that I think we talked about last time I was at the London Java community about a year ago. We did a workshop where Umberto had given an overview of Project Valhalla and where it was at. It seemed to be quite a bit of interest from the community there in London, but Project Valhalla is looking at value types in the Java platform. So looking at optimizing data. So Project Valhalla is one that has potential big impact on the community. There's also Project Portola. So we talked about the commitment and priority to have Java remain the #1 first choice for deployments in the cloud. So obviously containers is a big part of that. So we're looking at that within Project Portola. And Project ZGC is one of the projects that we've already seen a lot of JEPs come out of and be integrated into the platform releases. So as of Java 15, many things already available coming out of Project ZGC, a scalable, low latency garbage collector. And Project Panama, obviously big data, machine learning, big opportunities there, especially for Java. Obviously Python's used a lot in these spaces, but big opportunities here for the Java language and platform as well. So looking at those use cases, how can we improve Java's performance in a native environment? The main thing looking here at replacing JNI in Project Panama. And Project Loom is also one. I think you had a talk recently. You have one of the architects from Project Loom based there in London. So an update to the concurrency model for Java, with the big idea being millions of fibers, taking them and spawning them into a single JVM instance. And finally, Project Amber. So Project Amber is where you're getting those smaller language improvements, and it will continue to evolve over time. Many of these things have already come out in the last couple of Java releases. So things like switch expressions, records, and pattern matching. So when you want to download the early access builds, you can go to jdk.java.net. This is where you can also get the releases that are ready for use now. So this is where you can get JDK 15 for use in production, but you can also get the early access build for 16 now. 17 will probably be coming along very soon. And then some of those projects that I just highlighted have their own early access builds as well. So for instance, Valhalla, like I talked about in the beginning, you can get a project specific build for Valhalla, for Loom, and also for Panama. And one of the best ways to stay on top of things that are happening in addition to checking out those dashboards is to follow Openjdk on Twitter. You also can join Openjdk as a contributor. So the way you do that would be to sign the OCA available on Openjdk as an individual contributor. So that gives you a bit of an overview about what's happening with the technology. Obviously, as I mentioned, the JEPs that are going on in Openjdk are fed up into the platform releases as JSRs. So that means that the JCP as an organization has also had to make a few shifts. So we call that, we have rules that we operate by. We can call them informally the Constitution. So what we've continued to evolve the organization itself in keeping with these changes that have been happening in the developer community are ensuring that we continue to make everything transparent and open. So I talked about all of the technology that's currently being developed through the JCP and in Openjdk. You also can have access to all of that information and work as it's being developed, even if you aren't either a JCP member or an JDK contributor, you have access to be able to see that information. So that means open and transparent mailing lists, downloads available for reviewing and providing comments, as well as access to the issue trackers. And we've also resized our executive committee. So we used to have 2 executive committees and had a larger size executive committee. We've just resized the executive committee. So we have 18 executive committee members now, and 1 executive committee focused on the Java SE platform. The other thing we did is we looked at how can we enable projects to move faster. So as the Java platform transitioned to a 6-month release cadence, we needed to streamline the organization to be able to move faster, but also be able to bring in more members to be able to participate and contribute to that effort. So we broadened our membership, and the way we did that primarily is reducing fees and also looking at enabling easier membership for individuals. So that really was the primary driver for having that shift to primarily individual members. So what we did was we made some changes in the organization to enable individuals to join as associate members, and that for them to join as an associate member, they would no longer have to get permission from their employer to sign an agreement enabling them to join as an individual. So I think that was the primary shift in our membership. So we now have the majority of our members being associate members, individuals, but we also added a partner membership for Java user groups. So Java user groups had a simpler agreement to sign, and then we kept our full membership, which is really focused on companies and organizations, full nonprofits, but also some individuals. So for instance, individuals who are self-employed or have their own company. And in streamlining the JSR development cycle, what we realized was a lot of the way JSRs had to follow the process of the JCP really was an artifact of waterfall development method. And now things were being developed in open source and in a more agile way. So we removed some of the concrete discrete milestones and made things a longer, more open development period, but then still ensuring that we did have that time to freeze the code and enable the executive committee to vote at the end of the process and ensure that the project and the JSR were ready to be declared final and thereby available for the community to use in their code and projects and products in production versus in development. So we continue to talk about what we need to do next. We just had a maintenance release of the process last year. We have all of our discussion summaries available, as well as the materials that we discuss in the executive committee. But one of the things that we started to talk about in 2020 was, I think, tying back to that the 25-year anniversary of Java. So while Java has been very successful and popular and remains so today, looking towards the future and the next generation generation of Java, what can we do from the perspective of continuing to ensure that we bring in younger and more junior developers and have that vibrancy and future looking to the next 25 years. So we started an initiative called Java in Education with the idea that we really want to be able to continue to bring Java to the next generation of developers. And we are putting together some tools and resources for more senior Java developers and particularly Java user groups to be able to engage more fully with the educational community around them. And I know many Java user groups have already been doing this in the past, but what we're looking at is trying to provide not only resources and tools, but also some success stories from other JUG leaders and a community through a mailing list where JUG leaders can share with each other some of their experiences and working and reaching out to students and younger developers. So I started a page on jcp.org that focuses on Java in education, and we created one presentation already that's designed to deliver to either developers who haven't learned Java before or maybe who are just learning Java. And some of the things that we're going to be looking to roll out in the next couple of months is how Java is used in industry. So that's one of the most important things I think for students is how are you using Java? How is that going to impact my career? And then also, why would I want to use Java and how can I get started with Java? So some of the things that we provide are discount for the Java training and certifications. So that's really important for younger developers, especially in some regions of the world, not as much in North America, but definitely in other parts of the world. So discount for members, as well as a new course for junior developers, which is no charge through Oracle University, called the Java Explorer course. So that's something that we can offer to our younger developers, as well as, of course, the Oracle Academy resources. So helping Java user group leaders to communicate and connect with members of Oracle Academy, which are free resources available for educational institutions. So we'll continue to focus on that topic in the coming year. If you're interested in engaging on that topic, please reach out to me and let me know. But the result of these changes has been that the JCP has become more open than it was before. And I think what we've learned through many of the experiences we've had over the last several years is that working together, we really can achieve more. And the more participation that we have from the community, the more successful Java will continue to be. So I grabbed your graphic here. Barry, I think your team created that one. So how will you participate? As an individual, it's okay, but working as part of a team, what we found is that you're going to have better results as an individual, but also the feedback that you provide to the projects is going to be better and stronger. So helping each other, teaching each other, and working together is going to be a more fulfilling experience for you, as well as for the feedback that you provide to the projects will be more meaningful. So now we've grown to almost 100 different user group members around the world. And thanks to the London Java community for really kicking off that effort. It's been really rewarding to me to see so many Java user groups getting involved and participating in our efforts. And just looking at some of the logos I grabbed, you can see that we truly have gotten Java user group engagement from every region in the world. So I'm going to close my presentation with some concrete suggestions for how you can participate and how you can stay on top of the changes coming through the platform. And the first one, and I think the one that I think all developers should really get in the habit of doing, is downloading those early access builds. So as I mentioned, early access builds of 16 are already available now. I think also one of the best ways to follow along and stay on top of the early access builds is joining the adoption group mailing list. So there's an adoption group mailing list you can join. That's where you get notified that early access build is out. And then also the quality outreach group, which I'll talk about a little bit. So You can discuss early access builds. This is the page you would get if you go to jdk.java.net. You can download early access builds of 16. You would get the release notes as well as the link to see what changes were in this build and the issues that were addressed in the build. And these builds come out approximately every 2 weeks, and you can download them on the platform of your choice. A good place to provide feedback if you're not sure where to provide your feedback. So you download the early access builds, you test them against your application, and then you have feedback or maybe something didn't work. So the best thing to do would be to put it in the appropriate issue, but sometimes you don't know where to go. So I think having the adoption group in Openjdk is a great place on that mailing list. You can provide your comments and ask for suggestions on where you could put that feedback. The other project that I think is really valuable is the quality outreach group that's part of Openjdk. So here is where you have a collection of over 100 different free and open source projects that are dependent on Java. You can find their status as well as links to the project and the project leader. And some of the projects, like I highlighted a couple here, have a great program for bringing in new contributors. So if you're if you have a pain point, so a project dependency that you discover when you download the early access builds, or if you're just looking for a project that you want to get involved in around Java, you want to become more active in the community, build up your GitHub profile, this is one of the best places to do that. So if you go into the quality outreach group, you'll find a table. I brought a screenshot here. It only has the first few projects, but as I said, there's over 100 different projects in there. You can see the status, so where they're at in terms of being ready for the next release. And then also in the comments, you'll find links to go to the projects. And then also you can contact and reach out to the project lead and say you want to participate. And some of the projects have already put together a list of issues that are great for newcomers. So that's a great way to get started in a Java project as a contributor. The other thing is you can actually participate in a JSR. So picking a project is really the first thing to do. So pick a thing you want to do. I've designed this to be 5 tips. So first thing that you need to do is pick one thing to get started. So whether that's going to be leading a group or doing it on your own, of getting in the habit of downloading those early access builds, or contributing to a project in the quality outreach project, or leading a Java and education workshop, trying to engage with younger developers in your community or more junior developers in your community, or picking a standalone JSR or the platform JSR itself. Every JSR has a page where you can get the latest downloads, link to the project in Openjdk, view the issue tracker, as well as the discussion list. So you can pick the project that way. Second thing, communicate. So I mentioned that we have transparency. We have open mailing lists and issue trackers and freely available downloads, but you need to actually communicate that you're interested and you want to participate. No matter what you pick, it's really essential and vital that you actually give feedback and provide that communication. It's a two-way street. So I'd say the majority of benefits out of the transparency has been that developers have access to that information. But what I would really like to see is more developers providing feedback back into the project. So contributing back into the project. And that doesn't have to be code, but you should decide on what you're going to do. And I put together a collection of things that groups of developers, Java user groups, or individuals have had the most success with, or have been the most useful to project leaders, which the number one thing that project leads and spec leads tell me is they really would like more feedback, more participation and engagement. So I put together some suggestions. Maybe you have other suggestions or things that you want to do. You shouldn't be limited by my list, but these are some of the best places to start in terms of sharing your feedback on the issue trackers, downloading those early access versions of the reference implementation, or probably less popular with developers, but more valuable to leaders of projects, giving feedback on the specification itself or the Java docs. Not enough eyes seeing those. So the more developers who take the opportunity to review even a portion of those documents, the better it will be for everyone. Also, evangelizing and sharing, communicating about the things that you're doing will be helpful. So, whether that be on social media or by giving a lightning talk about any of the things that I just highlighted, or my personal favorite, helping with documentation. And the fourth step is follow through and comment. So going back to that communication piece, which again is really vital here. Once you've taken an action on any of these suggestions that I've made, make sure that you provide your comments and your contribution, whether that be on a mailing list or on an issue tracker. Share things there and follow the discussion so that when you do share something, you have a knowledgeable and response and feedback. So that's where oftentimes it can be helpful to have a group of developers, because obviously it takes time to follow all the discussions and the issue trackers. So if you had a small group of developers who are kind of dividing the task of who's going to follow the issue tracker, who's going to follow the discussion forum, and then having times where you meet together, either virtual or online, where you're sharing what's happened and discussing it and then providing your feedback. But regardless of whether you're doing it in person or virtually, what you're going to find is if you're organizing these meetings, whether it be a hack day or a workshop or just an informal discussion, you're going to find that you're going to have quite a bit of fun and you're going to grow your network exponentially, both within your local community as well as globally. So what I'd like to leave with you here today is that we do need you. You are a vital part of the success of Java, both in the future and tomorrow. And both yesterday and tomorrow, I should say. So I hope I've given you some motivation and ideas for how you want to get more involved in the Java platform. I'll leave you with a few links as well as where you can find me. We have our next public meeting December 9th, if you want to join us there. Our public meetings are always recorded and we post those on jcp.org if you can't make it in person. We also are going to be having ongoing discussions about the Java in Education initiative if you want to get involved with that project. So that brings me to the end of my formal comments. I think we have 10 minutes or so where I can take some questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen. If we don't have time for your question or I don't address it fully, you can reach out to me either on Twitter at HeatherVC or at my email address, heather@jcp.org. Okay, so I stopped sharing my screen. And I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you have any questions, you feel free to put those in the chat or unmute yourself and let me know your questions.
I have one. Thank you very much. That was a really interesting talk.
Thank you.
I was just curious, like a couple of months ago, the source code for Openjdk was moved over onto GitHub. And I just wondered, like, what impact did that have on participation and the community contribution?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I forgot to mention that when I had my screenshot of JDK 16. So that migration, migration from Mercurial to Git, as well as the migration over to GitHub, is part of JDK 16. So that will be officially complete with JDK 16, which will come out in March of 2021. So the code has been mirrored for quite a while over on GitHub, and I think really what you see on GitHub is that majority of projects there are Java projects. And so I think what you'll see is a great merging there in terms of there already are so many Java developers on GitHub, but then that you don't have to go over to Openjdk for the Java platform itself. It will all be right there on GitHub. I think that will be a great advantage to be able to really capture all of the mind share that's there in terms of Java developers who are already spending time on lots of different projects on GitHub. So it's not quite finished yet. Again, like I said, it's meant to be targeted to be complete in March, but I see it as a really good sign, encouraging sign. Does that address your question?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. There's one in the chat. It says the LTS releases contain preview features. So it's exactly the same, whatever's in JDK 11, which is the first LTS release, or JDK 17, which will be the next one. It will be there. Everything is exactly the same. So really the release, so everything in it is the technology, and then the support is really just using whatever was there. So yeah, I would have to go back and look at my snapshot to see if there was a preview feature in 11 or not. I think there was. Any other questions from folks? Does anyone have anything that maybe they didn't know about that they think they're going to try to get involved in as a result of hearing some of the things happening with the Java platform?
I like the sounds of the education thing, that program. I hadn't heard of that before.
Yeah. So we just started talking about that in the executive committee this year. So we have our executive committee elections every year. And last year we had a new member join who was elected by the membership, Ken Fogel, who's from Canada. And he is a computer science professor. So he suggested that we talk about that within the executive committee. And one of the things, I guess really, playing on what you all started in the London Java community with getting Java user groups more involved. I thought, that was a great space for Java user group leaders to really help bring Java to the next generation of developers. Because I think in some universities, developers aren't necessarily using Java. So Java user groups are in a great position to be able to reach out to their local educational community and bring up some of those developers and share with them, what you're doing in industry. I think, a lot of times developers often think they only need to learn whatever they learned in school these days. And once they get into industry, they see, oh, I can't just work on a project that just uses JavaScript, for instance, or Python, whatever they're using. Whatever project you work on, it's probably going to have some Java code in it. And so it's to your advantage to be able to learn the technology. So what we're trying to do is put together really just a collection of resources that are already out there that are easily digestible for folks who are working in industry to be able to share with those students or junior developers. So I think in the London Java community, you do have quite a few different initiatives. I think you're a little bit different in that many Java user groups have that kind of standard meet once a month, have a speaker, and have some Q&A. But I think within the London Java community, you have, like Barry talked about, the lightning talks and trying to bring in more newer speakers or more diverse speakers. And then I think you've also done some mentoring. So I could easily see that maybe you start up another subgroup, that's focused on, maybe bringing in some students and doing, a more introductory talk. And so that's really, the talk that Ken developed with some of our executive committee members was talking about, like, oh, did you know these new things about Java? So we have that presentation that you actually could give to some students who either aren't very familiar with Java or haven't coded in Java before, that, oh, it's different maybe than I thought about, because a lot of times in the universities, even they're teaching on Java 8 maybe. So as I just shared about in my presentation, Java 8 is quite different than Java 15 that we're at now. So yeah, if you're interested in getting involved with that, I would encourage you to reach out to Barry. I know Barry had to leave to care for his daughter. So any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I appreciate you sharing your evening with me. I know that it's getting late in London and still my morning here in California. Really looking forward to coming back and visiting London next year, though. So hope to see some of you next time I'm able to make the trip over. London's one of my favorite cities. If you have any questions, reach out to me, like I said, either on Twitter or via email or LinkedIn. Those are probably 3 most popular places to find me.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.